So this is the Mysteries of Great Zimbabwe, an article that I just saw, and I think it's interesting just to realize the hidden majesty and greatness of Great Zimbabwe. So the first whispered reports of a fabulous stone palace in the heart of southern Africa began in 1552. So this is in Mozambique. So in Mozambique, there's a port called Sofala. So Sofala here, all right, let's just utilize the searches. So here, let's just go to Sofala very quickly. So Sofala port opening, port open. All right, Sofala here. So the history of Sofala is traced to Great Zimbabwe. So this is where they first heard of Great Zimbabwe because it was already trading, right? Trading gold and certain things. But here, I don't know if I'm scrolling fast enough, but it's not very visible here. But this port opened in around 1900, right? So this is where they first heard about it. But in 1552, that's when they first heard where the source of the gold was. And then they're like, oh, all of this gold is from there. Because they didn't know where this gold was coming from. So there was just this secret around it, okay? So Debarus thought the edifice, which he never saw, was Aksum, which is north in the Horn of Africa, in one of the cities of Queen Sheba, which is Yemen, and Aksum, which is where the Zimbabweans also came from. So other Portuguese chroniclers of the day linked the rumours fortresses. So there were now these rumored fortresses with the region's gold trade and decided it must be the biblical Ophir from where Queen of Sheba procured gold for the Temple of Solomon. So the Queen of Sheba may have been in the Yemen area where the Shona people say they came from, right? And then she was also in contact with a place where there was so much gold, but it was such a huge secret because they knew about it. So now this is Zimbabwe and the view which the Europeans didn't discover until 1870s. So now since the 1900s they've been trading with this place and they don't know the source of this incredible wealth, right? But in the 1800s, this is when the Europeans discover Zimbabwe. So let's just say first European to see Great Zimbabwe. So this is Karl Marx in 1871. So he's the first one to see this kingdom, all right? So he's very, very famous. However, they say in the 1500s, Antonio Fernandez. So here is the same type of dates. So I guess when Antonio Fernandez heard about Zimbabwe in the 1500s, he went and tried to find it. But the story of Antonio Fernandez is to say that he got into Zimbabwe, but he, as I understand, he saw some of the stone castles here. Okay. Well, this is why it's good to even research it while it's being read. So the exploration could have started in the 1500s. So let's just say that they found out about it in the 1500s and that this article here is saying 1870s, referring to Karl Marx, but Antonio Fernandez may have already discovered it, right? So here is a city of stone that was hidden until the 15, 16, 17, 1800s for some. They didn't know what they were doing. And now these people have a history that is also hidden from even the people themselves and even other people because they were there since a long time ago. And then they built this. So in the 1552, so let's just say this is when they actually discovered it in the 1500s. But since the 900s, they were trading with this city, but no one knew about it. So it was like this hidden place. Like, all right, this king finds a very secluded place, and this place is also blessed with this gold. And now people who hear about it, they now start to connect the dots and say, "Oh, the Queen of Sheba, though, where did she get all that gold?" And then they're like, "Oh, it should be there because we've been looking." Because all of the travels that they were doing was just in hunting and or in pursuit of treasure. So they were just treasure hunters. All right. So so the city of stone, this notion persisted, and I haven't actually read this. So this is Karl Marx in 1871, eager to seek the ruins of Ophir, penetrated deep now um, into what is now Zimbabwe. He reached the home of a lone trader, right? On September 5, local Karanga tribesmen led Mark to the site. In the midst of the wooden savanna backed by bare granite hills stood stood a city of stone. So Karl Marx was the first one who actually now told people about this place. So his interpretation of what he saw was what people interpreted Great Zimbabwe to be after that. This is from 1871. But in the 1500s, when they kind of knew about it, it was a rumor, but it wasn't so popular. But he is the one who's like now he would like publish that, oh, there's a stone city which is great, right? So when they heard about this Great Zimbabwe, they were like, no, this cannot be greater than our own empire. And that's why their victory was in Victoria, which is where Great Zimbabwe was, naming Victoria Falls that, and naming our origins, the Lake Victoria, that, because of that achievement, which was symbolic. And there's so many symbolic things that they have done since the Victorian age. Some of the things were to take Mbuyane skull and things like that. It is very symbolic, it is very true, and it is also very odd. Okay, but it happened. So of fully 100 acres of these granite enclosures into a single one, not a single one was straight. All right. Mark was looking at the greatest pre Portuguese ruins of sub Saharan Africa. So, Great Zimbabwe is great because it is the biggest enclosure, or it is the biggest creation, man made creation after the pyramids. So, they're just two. If you study the pyramids, then you will study Great Zimbabwe because they're still the same people who had the same principles, which is very interesting. However, they were told to leave Egypt, and that's why it's an interesting thing to know who they are and what they were doing until the 1800s when people started knowing about them. They were just a secret, and I feel like it's still the biggest secret, you know. So ultimately, Mark, for all his tenacity, was no thinker. So here, I haven't read this. All right. So from a lintel, he cut small wood that he described as reddish. So here, they're just saying that he was making a conjecture that was not true. Okay. So I'll just leave it out there because the thing about Great Zimbabwe is that it's a place that was associated with the Bible in so many different ways. This is just one way. And another way was the fact that the capital city is Harare, just like Harar is also a city in Ethiopia, right? And that word is from the origins of these people. And they just used it arbitrarily because this is how they actually talk. So when they saw this place, they called Great Zimbabwe the Great Enclosure, the edifice's most impressive structure, which the local Karanga called Mumba Uhuru, the house of the great woman. So this house, Mumba Uhuru, the house of the great woman was also the queen's palace, but it was also a temple. So it was also something that was amazing. So this is also understood in the Karanga. So the Karanga is not just like a group of people, but it is actually the umbrella term of all Shona people from the basis of where they came from, that they had one name and then they branched off. So the Karanga had this tradition of giving people different totems. So if people have totems, they're basically a branch of this family tree, because that's what this family did. So that's what they used to do. And then different groups grew powerful, but they're all just one people. And this is also alluded to this story in the Bible called the confusion of faces, and we could get into that. But it's a very it's a very nuanced topic, because we have to understand it when we just like, it's easier to understand and grasp it when we just get like the basics first. But the confusion of faces is what this is. But Mumba Huru, this is Mumba, which is Imba, which is Zimba, which is Zimbabwe, the Great Zimbabwe. This is where the name comes from. Mumba Huru, which is great house, which is great Zimba, which is big house. So this is the house of a great woman. And so they were saying that this woman is the Queen of Sheba. So they were making all these conjectures based on what they had seen in the 1870s. But this structure was there for a very long time. So as it turns out, he did not really understand it. So this is just more of this article here. So in the meantime, Marx's line of reasoning distinguished it as it was the most purblind logic, perfectly suited Cecil Rhodes, whose BSA company occupied Mashonaland. And so Cecil Rhodes took over this land, which is so interesting. Interesting and sad in the sense that when you call them great, then how are you also comparing the fact that Cecil Rhodes, I feel like, how old was he? He was in his 20s when he was conquering these ancient people. So this is also something that I really also want, because like it has to be an objective view of things. So this is also why we need to understand what happened, if they were great masters, right? So indeed, on Rhodes's first visit to the site, local Karanga chiefs were told that the great master had come to see the ancient temple, which once upon a time belonged to white men. Okay, so this is how he went to see it. So eager to nail down the edifice's exotic origins once and for all, Rhodes and his BSAC quickly sponsored an investigation of Great Zimbabwe. So when you understand Rhodes, you're understanding that even though he was young, whatever he was doing was part of a system. So this system was using him as a very essential piece. So yeah, so they hired Theodore Bent, and the Mediterranean. He adhered tenaciously as Rhodes to the notion of the city's non-black origin. So they just basically found people who were just saying, "Oh no, this was built by the Greeks. Oh no, this was built by the Phoenicians. Oh no, this was anything besides black people." So all the artifacts Bent subsequently uncovered seemed indigenous, but the truth was in the pudding. So a prehistoric race built this. So the conclusion was that a prehistoric race built the ruins. This is what they were saying. A prehistoric race built the ruins, a northern race coming from Arabia, closely akin to the Phoenician and Egyptian, and eventually developing into a more civilized races of the ancient world. All artifact that Burnt turned up pointed to be an indigenous origin of Great Zimbabwe and its builders, but he would have none of it. So here is the confusing thing, because we did come from there, but we're also here. So at the same time, the people who were called Jews were in the Middle East, but they were also trading with the people in the South, because their children were in different places, but their fathers were there, or the land of their ancestors basically is where they came back to in the BC, in 500 BC. And then after 500 BC, this is when they started making this because of a certain secret that Zimbabwe has or still had or still has. All right. So Bent was amateurish, narrow-minded, but not utterly incompetent. Okay. So so not scientific research, but the preservation of the building. Instead, hell bent on finally settling the issues of his origins, launched into a full-scale archaeological investigation, claiming he was removing the filth and decadence of the Kaffir occupation. So he really hated the locals, the Karanga, who were there. So Great Zimbabwe was home in its heyday to 12 to 20,000 people. So the world eventually got back to the BASAC. So the reason why I'm just like scrolling this is, first of all, I don't want this video to be so long, and secondly, it will encourage you to read it and also interpret it on your own. And other than that, I don't want like to just have this be just me reading it, because it seems to be kind of long. But then here it goes into a lot of, because I haven't even read it, so it's also like I'm just reading it in real time for myself as well. So by the mid 15th century, balance of trade shifted to the north. Great Zimbabwe's people abandoned their once glorious stone city, leaving the stone ruin that Malk found 400 later inhabited by local Karanga people who had no idea of its history. This is very interesting. The Lemba include, because the the people who built it are the same people who were living there. So this is my first time seeing this, right? And I'm also not in agreement with it, because the place was built by the people who dwelt there, and this is in the oral tradition. But the thing about it is that the people who are now called Karanga are not just who they were before. Now they have branched off, but then everyone is from the same family tree. The Lemba, including their spiritual leader seen here, believe that their ancestors erected Great Zimbabwe. So this is the thing. The ancestor of the Lemba is what we call the original Karanga, although they ended up branching into different 12 branches actually. So all of them, like anything Shona, is basically that. So the locals, the indigenous, who they say are there. So they still have not solved this mystery, because they still cannot like grasp the mystery. Mangwane? So, despite decades of study, mysteries still cling to Great Zimbabwe like ivy. How did its residents manage to monopolize trade in the area? To what degree was it a religious center? Why was it abandoned? Even the question that, as Garrick said about its site itself, has given rise to much strong, widespread, and often bizarre emotional responses. Who built it has been only partly answered. Which Africans built it? Many tribes, including Shona and Venda, maintain their ancestors are responsible for Great Zimbabwe, but the Lemba are particularly insistent, says University. They claim that one of their clans, the Tovakare, oh, that's a very interesting name, were the actual builders of Great Zimbabwe. They claim that their clans, the Tovakare, whoa. This is a very interesting name. So yeah, we'll talk about that name. The actual builders of Zimbabwe. So the Lemba are obviously black Zimbabweans, right? And then they're also a branch of the Karanga. And then the people who came here were like, oh, people don't know about the history of this place. Why? Because they wanted to know the secrets of this place. So the people didn't tell them. So they're like, oh, no, we have no idea. Because the secret of this place is still in the people of this place. And this also traces to the ancestry. So this is why they don't really understand even up to today. This article is from 2020. Certain evidence appears to support the Lemba claim. This is the Lemba claim that is being supported by the evidence. So this would give it a certain connotation that has ties with the Judaic interpretation of the stone ruins. For instance, unlike other Bantu tribes, so there's a whole lot of mix matching with articles that the Lemba and the Venda are branches of the same tree, all right? But they say, unlike other Bantu tribes, although they're both Bantu, which is interesting. So, who bury their dead in crouched position, the Lemba buried theirs in an extended position. So did the ancient Zimbabweans. So this is not completely true because the kings in Mapungubwe were found in crouching positions. So you see, so it's stuff like that that really has to be dissected, and even the fact that it was discovered. So it's just one of those things. So one of the strongest pieces of evidence concerns trade. So this is important. This is why I started with Sofala. Great Zimbabwe was a civilization that was constructed very largely on wealth generated from cattle and trade. And given that for hundreds of years we know the Lemba were the great traders of the southern Africa, it seemed almost certain that their ancestors would have been involved in trading nexus between Great Zimbabwe and the Indian Ocean. So if the Lemba contention is true, does this mean that outsiders, that is, not native Africans, built Great Zimbabwe? So this is why it's confusing, because the Lemba are being seen as outsiders, and then the people there are being seen as basically another part, because the Lemba have traceable Semitic origins. So the interesting thing about the Zimbabweans, the Karanga, is that you will hear stories about Biri and Ganyire and things like the different tribes, the Nadi tribes who split the oceans or the seas or the waters. You hear that happening with Mbuya Nehanda multiple times. They've always been parting the seas. And so you hear this not only in the Lemba, but in different tribes. Like there's a certain tribe whose other name is called Vekwa Jekamfura, which is the ones who cut the waters. So the water, the answer is no, because by the time the Great Zimbabwe was built in medieval times, the Lemba had become decidedly African, having so thoroughly intermixed with Bantu Africans over many hundreds of years that today, among other African traits, the Lemba have dark skin and speak a Bantu language. So they're saying that they didn't have dark skin before. That's very interesting, and I don't think that's accurate. Indeed, the more contentious part of that question, who built it, has finally been put to rest almost full 50 years by De Barros and others, who first pronounced white did not build Great Zimbabwe's black did. But this fact only deepens the sense of mystery enveloping the site, as archaeologist Gertrude Thompson declared back in 1931. Examination of all the existing evidence gathered from every quarter still can produce no one single item that is not in accordance with the claim of Bantu origin and medieval date. Okay, so they cannot prove that they didn't do it. And then they're saying that the people who they found, they didn't know who did it, which I believe is false because of all the evidence that is within the understanding of those sacred poems, those psalms. That's why the Bible says we're encouraged to speak in psalms. So those psalms, if we spoke in those psalms, we'd understand this. So the interest in Zimbabwe and the allied ruins should on this account to all educated people be enhanced 100-fold. So the interest in Zimbabwe and the allied ruins should on all this account to all educated people. Wow. Okay, so I was hoping this video was gonna be short, but yeah, it has been enhanced 100-fold. It enriches, not only impoverishes, our wonderment at their remarkable achievement. So this is still astonishing, and astonishing has stone in it. I'll just put that there. Our wonderment, yeah, let me just illustrate that, and then this is gonna be because we're hanging out. So yeah, this is actually another name for this place, the House of Astonishment. So here, a stone. There we go, Ishment. So this is the stone accomplishment, the House of Astonishment. So this is of great surprise. Okay, so there's so many secrets to this place, and it's so astonishing, some of the secrets. So yeah, like a stupor, like it's stupefying. Okay, thou hast showed thy people hard things. Thou hast made us to drink the wine of astonishment. Okay, so this is all astonishing to people who are discovering that, oh, okay, so the people there are the people here, but the people here are supposed to be Jews, but the Jews, like everything was just stupefying them. They didn't know how to like piece it all together. So so yeah, a lot of people were really astonished. So this place is not something like it's a holy place, and it's an astonishing place, and because of that stone accomplishment. And then meant is also about like that uh this is all mentality. Okay. So this is where you get mentality and metal everything. They were also experiencing metal work, all right, because of their mentality. And so this is also mind, emotion, intellectual, individual emotional responses. All of these experiences, spiritual ideas, psychic matters, they were at this place. So it enriches, not impoverish, our wonderment at their remarkable achievement. For the mystery of Zimbabwe is the mystery which lies the still pulsating heart of native Africa. And they say pulsating heart because the stones, okay? So here we just get the tone, z, right? And then let's just do this, the stone, okay? So it's not the Stone Age, it's the Iron Age, which is the mentality, right? So the irons were the gold and the silver, the brass and the platinum that they were using, right? So this is what it is, the stone, which is what they're saying is still pulsating in tones. So yes, this is a very fascinating place, and the hidden splendor of Zimbabwe, the greatness of great Zimbabwe.